Have you ever asked yourself this question? Why is it that the more I give, the less they seem to care? Why does your loyalty get answered with silence? Why does your patience get repaid with manipulation? And why does your love get mistaken for weakness? If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Many of us have lived through this painful cycle. We pour our time, our energy, our compassion into someone, hoping they'll appreciate it, hoping they'll see the depth of our heart. But instead of gratitude, what we get is entitlement. Instead of care, we get indifference. And here's the truth the Stoics understood long ago. It's not because you were too soft. It's not because your love was flawed. It's because they saw your strength and tried to drain it for themselves. They recognized the light in you, but instead of nurturing it, they tried to use it as their fuel. Think about it. When you gave your loyalty, did they honor it? Or did they quietly assume it would always be there, no matter how they treated you? When you offered patience, did they grow? Or did they stretch it further, testing how much you would tolerate? And when you loved them deeply, did they return it? Or did they treat it as if it made you weak? The Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca remind us of something vital. Value isn't measured by how much you give, but by who receives it. Giving is noble. Kindness is strength. But when your generosity falls into the hands of someone who only takes, it becomes an act of self-betrayal. I want you to pause for a moment and really sit with this thought. Not everyone deserves access to your kindness. This doesn't mean your kindness is wrong. It doesn't mean your love is wasted. It means their heart was never ready, maybe never willing to receive what you offered. And here's where the shift happens. This is not about revenge. This is not about making them pay. Stoicism is not obsessed with punishment. It's about realization. It's about clarity. It's about reaching that point where silence becomes your answer and distance becomes your healing. Have you ever noticed that? That moment when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to convince them of your worth, when you finally walk away not to punish them, but to protect yourself. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. And if you've ever felt like you were good to the wrong people, then stay with me, because this may be the conversation your soul has been waiting for. Let's bring this closer to real life. Maybe you've had a friend who only called when they needed something, but disappeared the moment you needed them. Or maybe you've been in a relationship where you kept forgiving, kept hoping, kept pouring in love, only to realize they were just comfortable taking. And the whole time you told yourself, if I love them the right way, if I'm patient enough, if I hold on a little longer, maybe they'll change. But here's the harsh truth. Some people don't want to change. Some people don't want love. What they want is control. And as long as you keep giving, they'll keep taking. That's why the Stoics warn us. Don't confuse compassion with self-abandonment. Don't confuse loyalty with chains that bind your worth. Because the moment you hand over your peace, you've given away the very power that makes you whole. So what do? You reclaim it. You take it back. Not with anger, not with shouting, not with long speeches, but with silence, with space, with the courage to step back and say, I deserve more. I will not betray myself to keep you comfortable. This is the essence of Stoicism applied to real life. It teaches us that our true strength isn't in endless endurance, but in knowing when to let go. It's in refusing to let someone else's blindness define our value. And here's the most liberating part. When you finally stop begging to be seen, you start seeing yourself clearly. When you stop giving your energy to people who misuse it, you start building a life where your peace is non-negotiable. Remember this. Walking away is not weakness. It is clarity. Silence is not defeat. It is wisdom. And distance is not abandonment. It is protection. So as we begin this journey, I want you to ask yourself, where in my life am I giving too much to the wrong people? Where am I betraying myself in the name of love or loyalty? Because until you answer those questions honestly, you'll keep repeating the same cycle. The Stoics believe that peace is a choice, And every time you choose to protect your energy instead of wasting it on those who can't respect it, you are living stoicism in its purest form. So if you've ever felt drained, unappreciated, or invisible, lean into this truth. It's not your weakness, it's your strength. The fact that you gave means you had abundance. The fact that they misused it doesn't change your value. It only reveals theirs. This video, this moment right now, isn't about their regret. It's about your realization. Not about their punishment, but about your protection. And as we continue, we'll uncover how silence, distance, and clarity can become the most powerful tools for living a life of true Stoic strength. Stay with me because what comes next may just change the way you see yourself and the way you choose to love forever. Have you ever looked back and asked yourself, why did I stay so long? Why did I keep pouring my heart into someone who only drained me? If you've ever been there, I want you to know this. You were not naive. You were not blind. You were simply hoping that your love could make a difference. You believed that if you just gave a little more, waited a little longer, showed a little more patience, maybe they would finally see the value of your presence. But here's the truth we don't like to admit. Some people never intended to value you. Some people don't want love, they want control. And when they saw your kindness, they didn't cherish it. They used it. They treated your compassion like a leash, your forgiveness like permission, and your silence like approval. You see, giving is not weakness. In fact, it takes enormous strength to keep showing up with love even when you're not being treated the same way. But strength can be exploited when it's not guarded by wisdom. That's why the Stoics remind us, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. You believed your light could dye theirs, that your love could heal their wounds. But the problem was never your love. The problem was that their heart wasn't ready to receive it. Think about it. How many times did you excuse their absence, telling yourself they were just busy? How many times did you forgive their coldness, convincing yourself they were going through something? How many times did you rationalize the silence, the manipulation, the subtle selfishness, because deep down you wanted to be wrong about them? That's what love does. It makes us hope. It makes us believe that maybe, if we hold on just a little longer, they'll wake up and see us. But some people don't want to see. They prefer the shadows, because your light exposes what they refuse to face within themselves. Your peace reminded them of their chaos. Your compassion reminded them of their emptiness. Your strength reminded them of their weakness. And instead of rising with you, they tried to pull you down. They tried to dim your light, not because you were too much, but because you were everything they weren't willing to become. This is where the danger lies. Giving is not the problem. Giving to the wrong people is. When you continue pouring into someone who only takes, your empathy turns into self-abandonment. Your loyalty becomes a leash around your own neck. Your forgiveness becomes a guarantee that they'll hurt you again because they've learned there are no consequences. The Stoics teach us to guard our peace the way a warrior guards his shield. Epictetus once said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." In other words, the moment you keep allowing it, you're part of your own erosion. And I know that's hard to hear, because none of us want to believe we played a role in our own suffering. But awareness is power. And the moment you stop participating in your own depletion, that's the moment you take your power back. Let me give you an example. Imagine a person who comes to your home every time there's a storm. They never help you fix the roof, never stay to clean the mess, never invest in making the house stronger. They just come to take shelter, eat your food, rest in your warmth, and the moment the storm passes, they're gone. That's how many people treat relationships. They never came to build. They only came to borrow your strength. So what do? You stop offering yourself as an endless refuge. You realize you're not responsible for saving someone who's committed to staying broken. You understand that your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. Your distance is not cruelty, it's protection. And your refusal to keep giving is not betrayal, it's self-respect. The moment you set boundaries, you disrupt their illusion of control. When you no longer react, they panic. When you no longer chase, they're exposed. Because manipulation feeds on your participation. Once you withdraw it, their power disappears. Here's the perspective shift. You were never weak for staying. It takes strength to give, to hope, to believe. But your true strength reveals itself the moment you stop betraying yourself for people who never intended to honor you. That's when you rise. That's when you reclaim your voice, your peace, your dignity. So ask yourself, who in my life am I giving to without return? Where am I mistaking patience for progress? Where am I forgiving so much that I'm teaching them my love has no boundaries? These are not easy questions, but they're the doorway to freedom. The Stoics remind us that peace doesn't come from being loved by everyone. It comes from choosing wisely who you give your love to. It comes from aligning your actions with reason, not desperation. It comes from protecting your soul from those who see your worth but only seek to use it. And here's the final truth I want you to hold on to. Your kindness is not the problem. Your loyalty is not the problem. Your love is not the problem. The problem is giving those treasures to people who only know how to spend them, never how to invest them. The moment you stop, the moment you walk away, you're not losing, you're finally winning. Because you're no longer complicit in your own erosion. You're no longer allowing them to write the story of your worth. And that, my friend, is the first real step into Stoic freedom. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the loudest statement you can make is complete silence? Not the silence of fear, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of clarity. The kind that comes when you finally had enough, when you no longer need to explain, argue, or beg to be heard. You didn't slam the door. You didn't send long paragraphs trying to prove your worth. You didn't scream or demand closure. You simply stopped showing up to the chaos. And that silence, that graceful, grounded, unshakable silence shook them more than any outburst ever could. Because here's what they expected. They were ready for drama. They were prepared for tears, for arguments, for one last emotional plea. They thought you'd fight for them, even while they were destroying you. What they never prepared for was your peace. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And choosing silence, choosing distance, choosing to walk away without hatred, that is courage in its purest form. Because silence doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you cared too much for too long, and now you've finally decided to care for yourself first. And that's what unsettled them. Not your anger, but your absence. Not your words, but your withdrawal. Because when someone is used to feeding on your reactions, silence is starvation. When someone thrives on manipulating your emotions, peace becomes their punishment. Think about it. How many times did you forgive when you shouldn't have? How many times did you give them the benefit of the doubt, even as they chipped away at your peace? You gave them chances. You gave them time. You gave them compassion, even when they gave you indifference. So when you finally stopped, when you said no more, without saying a word, they were left shocked and confused. And here's why. People often mistake kindness for weakness. They assume your patience is endless, that your forgiveness is automatic, that your loyalty means you'll never walk away. But when you finally do, when you break the pattern and reclaim your silence, it exposes the truth they never wanted to face. They were never entitled to your love. They didn't just lose a person, they lost something rare. They lost connection. They lost someone who could see the good in them, even at their worst. And that kind of presence doesn't come around often. Once it's gone, it leaves an emptiness that no distraction can fill. Of course, they'll try to label you. They'll call you cold, selfish, heartless. But let's be honest, you weren't cold. You were exhausted. You weren't selfish. You were depleted. You weren't heartless. You simply realized that your heart deserved protection. And this is the paradox. The very silence they mocked, the very boundaries they resented, are the same things that now haunt them. Because silence is not emptiness. Silence is a mirror, And in that mirror, they no longer see your warmth. They see themselves, the choices they made, the damage they caused, the love they took for granted. This is why your silence is stronger than any revenge. Revenge seeks to hurt them, but silence forces them to sit with themselves. Revenge tries to prove a point, but silence declares, "Let me give you a picture. Imagine two people in a room. One is screaming, demanding attention, throwing insults. The other stands calm, collected, quietly choosing to walk out the door. Who has the real power in that moment? It's not the one making noise. It's the one who refuses to participate. That's what your silence did. It shifted the balance of power. And here's the beauty of it. Silence is a wall that doesn't need bricks. It's a boundary that doesn't need explanation. It protects you without trapping you. It frees you without needing permission. And most importantly, it allows you to hear your own voice again after being drowned out for so long. So let me ask you, where in your life do you need more silence? Is it with that friend who only calls when they need something? With that family member who always criticizes but never supports? With that partner who mistakes your forgiveness for permission? Because silence isn't just walking away from others, it's walking back to yourself. The Stoics believed in mastering the self, not controlling others. And when you chose silence, that's exactly what you did. You stopped handing over your peace. You stopped letting them dictate your worth. You stopped explaining why you deserve better and simply chose better. They thought your calm meant defeat, but it was the beginning of your return. The pause before your rise, the quiet before your rebirth. Because silence is not the end of the story. Silence is the beginning of a new one. And for them, that silence is haunting. It lingers in the spaces where your laughter used to be. It echoes in the emptiness left behind. It whispers the truth they don't want to admit. I had something rare, and I lost it. But for you, silence is healing. It's the medicine that restores your strength, the shield that guards your soul, the choice that finally brings you peace. And when you look back, you'll realize the loudest, most powerful move you ever made was saying nothing at all. Have you ever walked away from someone silently, only to realize later that your absence spoke louder than any argument you could have screamed? At first, they act unfazed. They laugh a little louder, post pictures as if nothing has changed, surround themselves with noise to cover the silence you left behind. They tell people you were too much, too emotional, too intense. But time has a way of stripping away pretense, and slowly, your absence begins to echo in places they can't ignore. Here's the truth. People don't always feel the weight of what they lost immediately. Distractions work for a while. New faces, new conversations, temporary highs, they all give the illusion of moving on. But there comes a quiet night when the noise fades. Maybe it's when they scroll through old photos. Maybe it's when they lie awake, staring at the ceiling with no one texting back. Or maybe it's when they stand in a room full of people, yet feel completely unseen. That's when the realization whispers, I had something rare, and I destroyed it. And that's when the regret begins. Not the kind they admit openly, but the kind that hides behind ego. The kind they mask with laughter, excuses, and stories they tell themselves. But deep down, they know. They didn't just lose a partner, a friend, or a companion. They lost an anchor. They lost the one person who stayed when others left. The one who saw the good in them even when they were showing their worst. The Stoics remind us not to live for the opinions of others. And here's where that wisdom shines brightest. You didn't walk away to prove a point. You didn't leave to make them suffer. You left because your soul deserved peace. You didn't burn bridges. You simply stopped crossing them. You didn't block their number out of spite. You just stopped answering out of wisdom. You didn't shout your worth. You embodied it in silence. And that's what unsettled them most. Because no matter how many people they try to impress, no matter how many distractions they chase, they can't replicate the connection they had with you. Connection isn't about attention. It's about being truly seen. And once you've experienced that kind of depth, everything else feels shallow. Think of it like this. You were the rare book on a crowded shelf. While others skimmed headlines and flipped through cheap paperbacks, you were the volume filled with wisdom, depth, and substance. But instead of reading, they left you gathering dust. And when you finally walked away, they realized too late they'd never find another story like yours. Of course, they may never admit it. Pride won't let them. They'll pretend they're fine. They'll keep up appearances. But the contrast is haunting. Every surface-level relationship now reminds them of the depth they squandered. Every hollow conversation reminds them of the connection they dismissed. And every face they meet reminds them of the one they'll never replace you. Here's the irony. They thought your silence would break you. They thought you'd fall apart without them. But instead, it broke them. It forced them to sit in the shadows of their own choices. Because you weren't just anyone. You were the one who showed them unconditional loyalty, the one who gave without keeping score, the one who loved without conditions. And losing that kind of presence isn't just loss, it's a reckoning. The Stoics teach us that the best revenge is to be unlike the one who wronged you. And that's exactly what you did. You didn't retaliate. You didn't seek to destroy them. You chose growth. You chose healing. You chose a future where their name no longer defines your story. And that's what they can't handle, the fact that you became better, stronger, freer without them. Let me tell you something powerful. Sometimes the most haunting punishment is not being hated. It's being forgotten. Not erased with bitterness, but replaced with peace. While they replay the past, you're writing a new chapter. While they're haunted by regret, you're walking lighter, freer. So if you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever wondered whether leaving made you weak, remember this. You are the one who got away. Not because you vanished, but because you finally realized your worth. You stopped shrinking to fit into their small world and chose to expand into your own. And that's what they'll never escape. Every time they hear your name, every time they stumble across your picture, every time they remember the way you once made them feel safe, they'll be reminded of what they lost. And the truth will sting. Not because you cursed them, not because you punished them, but because you simply lived. You chose yourself. And that choice echoes louder than any revenge ever could. So let me leave you with a question. Have you been underestimating the power of your absence? Because sometimes your silence, your distance, your decision to walk away, that's the loudest message you'll ever send. And the one thing they'll never be able to forget is this. You were the one who truly stayed when no one else did. And now, you're the one they'll never get back. There comes a moment in life when you realize it's not about them anymore. It's about you. Not in a selfish, careless way, but in a life-saving way. You wake up one day and realize that you've been disappearing, not all at once, but little by little. And finally, you decide, no more. I choose myself. This is one of the hardest, yet most powerful decisions you will ever make. Because for so long, you were trained to believe that choosing yourself was selfish, that setting boundaries was cruel, that saying enough meant you were cold. But the truth? It means you finally remembered who you are. When you chose yourself, you didn't slam the door in anger. You didn't craft a dramatic speech. You didn't go on a campaign to destroy their name. You just stopped betraying your own soul. You stopped sacrificing your peace for their comfort. You stopped bleeding just to prove your love. And that's when the shift happened. Suddenly, they weren't in control anymore. Their ego tightened when your name came up. Their pride cracked when they saw your face glowing in someone else's feed, calm, grounded, unbothered. Because deep down, they knew the truth. You became everything they never thought you could be without them. Every silent step forward you take now sends a message they can't unhear. I no longer need you to survive. I am thriving without you. And that realization burns deeper than any words you could ever throw back at them. Here's the irony: they thought you'd collapse without them. They thought you'd spend nights begging for closure, waiting for answers, replaying the past over and over. But instead, you leveled up. You poured all that energy, the patience, the loyalty, the strength they misused back into yourself. And the result? Transformation. The Stoics would call this realignment, not revenge. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And that's exactly what you've become. Unlike them, they thrived on control. You chose freedom. They lived in ego. You embraced humility. They tried to break you. You built yourself stronger than ever before. Let me give you an example. Think about a storm that destroys a house. At first, it looks like total devastation. Walls are broken, windows shattered, the roof torn away. But then, something beautiful happens. The people who live there rebuild. This time, with stronger foundations, better materials, wiser planning, and the house that once stood fragile now becomes unshakable. That's what you did with your life. You rebuilt. And the life you're living now is stronger because of what you endured. Of course, they'll try to twist the narrative. They'll call your healing selfish. They'll label your silence cold. They'll paint your boundaries as disrespectful. But none of that is true. The truth is, they can no longer access the version of you that tolerated being drained. You're no longer available to their chaos. You're no longer shrinking to fit inside their small world. You've outgrown them not with hatred, but with vision. And that's what terrifies them most. Because every smile you wear now, every moment of peace you protect, every boundary you hold, from it all screams one undeniable truth. They lost someone rare, and you didn't lose anything. The Stoics remind us, freedom comes when you master yourself, not others. And that's what you've done. You stopped asking, "Why did they hurt me?" and started asking, "Why did I keep allowing it?" That question is the turning point, because once you answer it honestly, everything changes. Your spine straightens, your clarity returns, your soul whispers, "Never again." And from that moment forward, you are unstoppable. You no longer need their validation. You no longer chase their recognition. You no longer beg for their love. Because you've realized something more powerful. Your worth has never depended on their ability to see it. So let me ask you, where in your life do you need to choose yourself more boldly? Is it in your relationships, where you've given too many second chances? Is it in your work, where you've let others define your value? Or is it within your own mind, where you've been your harshest critic? Because here's the truth, choosing yourself is not about pushing people away. It's about pulling yourself back to the version of you that knows peace is priceless. Back to the version of you that values self-respect over approval. Back to the version of you that refuses to shrink just to be tolerated. When you choose yourself, you don't just survive, you transcend. You rise into the life you were always meant to live. A life where your joy is justice, where your peace is power. Where your existence unshaken, unbothered, unstoppable becomes the loudest declaration of all. And that, my friend, is the ultimate Stoic victory. Not revenge, not anger, not bitterness, but clarity. The quiet, unshakable clarity that says, "I will not betray myself again. I choose me." Have you ever waited for justice to arrive like a thunderclap, only to discover it came in silence? That's the thing about karma. It doesn't put on a show. It doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. And it doesn't move on your timeline. Karma is patient. Karma is law. Quiet, slow, but absolute. The Stoics understood this long before we called it karma. To them, it wasn't some mystical punishment from the universe. It was the natural consequence of living out of alignment with virtue. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke." In other words, The moment you stop giving power to the one who harmed you, the balance begins to shift. And here's what most people get wrong. Karma isn't about watching someone suffer. It's not about getting a front row seat to their downfall. That's just your wounded pride craving validation. Real justice doesn't need your attendance. The real power is when you no longer care if they regret it because you've already reclaimed your peace. Think about it. A manipulator expects two things from you: your presence and your reaction. That's all they need to keep their illusion of control alive. As long as you keep showing up, keep defending yourself, keep explaining, keep arguing, you're still feeding their power. They don't need to win the argument. They just need you to stay in it. But when you finally go silent, when you finally walk away without drama, that's when karma speaks. Not because you cursed them, but because you stopped carrying them. And in that void, they're left with something they've avoided their whole lives themselves. Imagine this. They pick up their phone, expecting another message from you. Nothing. They scroll their feed, waiting to see if you posted something cryptic they can interpret as weakness. Silence. They ask around, but no one knows where you are, because you're not hiding, you're free. And slowly the panic creeps in, because the chaos they fed on is gone. The drama they thrived on has vanished. What's left? Just them, and the mirror of their own choices. That's karma. Not fireworks, not explosions. Just the slow unraveling of a life built on taking without gratitude, on manipulating without love, on consuming without ever giving back. Karma doesn't shout, it whispers. It removes what they thought they'd always have: your patience, your presence, your forgiveness, and replaces it with emptiness. Let me tell you a story. A man once had a woman who loved him too much. She forgave when she shouldn't have. She stayed when she should have left. She gave more than he ever deserved. And when she finally walked away, he shrugged. Within a week, he had someone new. He thought he'd moved on. But years later, sitting across from another woman who flinched every time he raised his voice, he remembered her. Not because he missed her, but because something inside him knew he had broken something pure. And now, nothing felt real anymore. That's karma. Not dramatic, not public. Just the quiet haunting that comes when you realize you destroyed something you can never get back. And here's the Stoic lesson. Karma doesn't work while you're still saving them. It doesn't work while you're still explaining, still excusing, still handing out chances like candy. Karma only begins when you step back, when you stop being the shield that absorbs their chaos, when you finally say, I am no longer available for this. Isn't that freeing? To know that your job was never to punish them, that you don't have to wait for them to get what they deserve, because what they deserve is already built into the path they're walking. You don't have to push. But let's be honest, it's tempting, isn't it? Tempting to want to see it, to hear about their regret, to watch them crawl back and admit they were wrong. That's human, but that desire, that's just pain dressed up as justice. The Stoic in you has to remind the human in you. Your healing isn't about their suffering, it's about your freedom. Epictetus taught, no man is free who is not master of himself. And that's the heart of this. Freedom begins when you stop waiting for their apology, their regret, their downfall. Because every minute you wait for them to pay is another minute you're still tied to their chain. So let me ask you, what if you stopped waiting? What if you stopped checking to see if they've changed? What if you trusted life to handle its own justice, and instead poured your energy into building a life so peaceful, so purposeful, that their consequences became irrelevant to your path? That's when you win. Not because they lost, but because you finally walked away with dignity, because you chose healing over havoc, silence over spectacle, clarity over chaos. And while they may never say it out loud, while their pride may never let them admit it, in a quiet room, in an empty bed, in the hollowness of connections that never quite measure up, they'll feel the absence of you, not because you punished them, but because you didn't. That's the power of karma. Quiet, inevitable, undeniable. And when it speaks, it doesn't roar in their face. It whispers in their soul. There's a moment, a heavy, earth-shifting moment, when they finally realize it's over. Not a pause, not a game, not a tactic. Truly over. You're not waiting for an apology. You're not checking your phone in secret hope. You're not hurting in silence, waiting for them to change. And that's when their unraveling begins. You see, manipulators always assume they'll have another chance. They misread your patience as weakness, your silence as submission, your forgiveness as desperation. They believed you'd always crawl back, no matter how many times they pushed you away. But when you didn't, when you smiled instead, healed instead, moved forward instead, the illusion shattered. Because nothing frightens the self-absorbed more than irrelevance. They watch you now from a distance. They scroll past your name, pretending not to notice, but their stomach knots every time they see your face glowing with peace. And what unsettles them most isn't your success. It's your calm. You don't look like someone broken. You don't even look like someone who remembers them. And to a manipulator, that's the cruelest punishment, being erased from the center of your world. But here's the truth. You didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring about yourself more. That's not selfishness. That's awakening. One day you just saw it clearly. The cycle, the draining loop of disrespect, apology, repeat. And instead of exploding in rage, what set you free was quiet certainty. I deserve peace more than I need closure. So you dropped the sword, you left the battlefield, and your absence spoke louder than any speech ever could. They scramble now. Loud laughter in public, new faces on their arm, performances for the camera. But it's all hollow, because deep down, they know. They didn't just lose someone who loved them. They lost someone who stayed longer than they deserved. They lost the one who would have weathered every storm with them, if only they had shown a little sincerity. But instead, they chose ego over empathy, power over partnership, and now they're left with nothing but the echo of what could have been. And here's the most poetic part. The day they realize you're never coming back is the same day you return to yourself. No more shrinking to fit the tiny space they allowed you. No more apologizing for being too much when you were simply too real. No more giving away your soul in fragments to someone who treated it as disposable. You've come back home not to them, but to you. This is what the Stoics called true freedom. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And that's exactly what you reclaimed. You stopped being mastered by their moods, their silences, their manipulations. You reclaimed your emotional sovereignty, your right to peace. And here's the part they never saw coming. Silence is not emptiness. It's a boundary. It's a declaration. It's the invisible line that says, I will not betray myself again. They'll sit with that. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the day will come when their distractions grow quiet. And when they're alone, they'll hear it the sound of a door that closed softly, but permanently. And that sound will haunt them. Not because you cursed them, not because you punished them, but because you left without warning. You didn't give them a chance to prepare, to manipulate, to spin another story. You just left. And nothing unsettles a manipulator more than the absence of an ending they can control. So if you've ever wondered whether you were too harsh, remember this. Leaving quietly doesn't make you cruel. And walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Your silence, your absence, your refusal to return, that is your final act of power. And it was flawless. There comes a point in your journey when you stop waiting for an apology. Not because you gave up, but because you realized you no longer need it. That's the quiet shift, the subtle turning of the tide. When you understand that closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't need a stage. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks. Healing is quiet, like the wind changing direction, barely noticed at first but impossible to deny. One day, you wake up and realize you're not checking your phone anymore. You're not replaying the same arguments in your head. You're not asking, why did they do this to me? Instead, you're asking, why did I keep letting it happen? And that question changes everything. Because the truth is, they didn't stop you from healing. You stopped yourself every time you reopened the door, every time you excused their behavior, every time you hoped they would be different. But the moment you chose yourself, the moment you turned your energy inward, their power ended. The Stoics knew this. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And the most painful waste is giving your time, your precious, limited time to people who were never ready to receive your depth." Think about it. They weren't ready for your honesty. They mistook your presence for permanence, assumed you'd always be there, until one day you weren't. That's what healing looks like. It doesn't come with drama or ultimatums. It comes with stillness, with the decision to stop pouring into a cup that only leaks, with the courage to walk away, not because you hate them, but because you love yourself enough to stop. And that's when you became untouchable. Not because you hid, but because you rose. Healing creates altitude. The higher you climb, the thinner the air becomes. It's not personal, it's just natural. Not everyone can breathe at the level you've reached. And those who once thrived in your storms, they can't survive in your calm. They see the change, not in grand gestures, but in absence. The way you no longer explain, the way you no longer beg, the way you've stopped showing up to places where you used to shrink. At first, they told themselves stories. You'll come back. You're just being dramatic. But with each passing day, the silence becomes undeniable. Not cold, not cruel, just complete. And here's the paradox. They may never admit it, but they feel it. Every time your name comes up in a conversation, every time they see your face in passing, every time they remember how it felt to be seen by you, they realize what they lost, not attention, but connection. And connection like that can't be replaced. They'll try, of course. They'll chase distractions. They'll search for substitutes. But what you gave wasn't performance. It was presence. And presence like that leaves a ghost that no replacement can silence. This is why healing makes you untouchable. Because once you've faced yourself, your wounds, your patterns, your mistakes, no one can weaponize them against you again. Once you've turned your scars into wisdom, they no longer chain you. The Stoics called this self-mastery. Epictetus taught that true freedom comes when you master yourself, not others. And when you chose healing, that's exactly what you did. You stopped being their victim. You stopped being your own jailer. You stepped out of their theater and into your own reality. And now, look at you. You're calmer, clearer, stronger. You don't need to perform pain to prove you were hurt. You don't need to perform healing to prove you've moved on. You simply embody peace. And that peace is louder than any revenge ever could be. They may tell others they're fine. They may pretend they don't care. But the truth finds them in quiet moments when distractions fade, when the room grows silent, when the weight of what they lost presses in. And in those moments, they're haunted not by your anger, but by your absence. Meanwhile, you're not watching. You're not waiting. A life where your worth isn't debated but known, where your peace isn't negotiated but protected, where your presence isn't exploited but honored. And that's why you're untouchable now. Because healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about transforming it. The pain they caused became the foundation of your strength. The silence you chose became the sound of your freedom. The boundaries you built became the walls of your sanctuary. So if you've ever doubted your progress, hear this. You are no longer who you were when they left you. You've changed landscapes. You've rebuilt your home on ground that doesn't shake when someone else stomps their feet. You've become someone they can't reach, not because you're hiding, but because you've risen too high for their games to matter. And that, my friend, is the gift of healing. It doesn't make you bitter. It makes you untouchable. There's a different kind of power that comes when you stop looking for strength outside of yourself and start building it within. It's called inner resolve, and once you cultivate it, no one can take it away from you. For so long, you measured your worth through the eyes of others. Their approval gave you confidence, their rejection left you shattered. But inner resolve is what happens when you stop outsourcing your peace. When you decide, I will not let another person's chaos determine my calm. People may call you distant now. They may say you've changed, that you've grown cold. But the truth is, you're not cold, you're clear. You're no longer handing out unlimited access to your heart. You've learned that not everyone deserves to sit at the table of your soul. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that other people's opinions were fleeting, that their actions were beyond his control. What mattered was his own character, his own discipline, his own inner compass. And when you live like that, you become unshakable. Think of it like a tree in the middle of a storm. The wind howls, the rain lashes, but the tree doesn't stand because the storm is weak. It stands because its roots are deep. That's what inner resolve does. It roots you, it anchors you, it makes you steady no matter how chaotic the world around you becomes. And let's be real, not everyone will like this version of you, because when you no longer bend to manipulation, when you no longer beg to be seen, when you stop giving just to keep the peace, you disrupt the systems that thrived on your compliance. They'll call you selfish. They'll call you uncaring. But those are just labels tossed out by people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Ask yourself, how many times did you say yes when your soul was screaming no? How many times did you bite your tongue to avoid conflict, only to feel that conflict growing inside you instead? That's not peace. That's self-betrayal. Inner resolve is when you decide, I would rather disappoint others than keep betraying myself. That's the shift. That's the strength. And once you taste it, you'll never go back. Let me share a story. A woman once spent years giving everything to a relationship, her time, her money, her energy. Every time he stumbled, she picked him up. Every time he lied, she forgave. Every time he disappeared, she waited. Until one day, she looked in the mirror and realized she didn't recognize herself anymore. And that's when something inside her changed. She stopped asking, how can I make him love me? And started asking, why am I not loving myself? From that day forward, her resolve became her power. She set boundaries. She stopped answering calls that drained her. She stopped explaining decisions that protected her. And she stopped apologizing for choosing peace. Did people call her cold? Yes. Did some walk away? Absolutely. But here's the truth. She didn't lose anything. She gained herself. That's what inner resolve gives you. The courage to stand firm even when others don't understand. The courage to hold your boundaries without needing applause. The courage to choose the long, quiet road of self-respect over the short thrill of temporary approval. The Stoics called this mastery of the self. Epictetus taught, no man is free who is not master of himself. And mastery isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling your response. It's about saying, I can't control what they do, but I will not let it break me. So where does your resolve come from? It comes from discipline. From small daily choices to protect your energy, to honor your time, to invest in your growth. It comes from refusing to compromise your values just to fit into spaces that don't deserve you. It comes from realizing that your peace is not up for negotiation. And here's the beautiful part. Once you've built that kind of inner strength, life gets lighter because you stop chasing people who don't want to stay. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop needing the world to validate you because you've already validated yourself. So let me ask you, what would your life look like if you lived from inner resolve every day? What would change if you stopped saying yes out of fear and started saying yes only when your soul agreed? What if you stopped defending yourself to those who were never listening and started walking with the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth? That's the freedom Stoicism points us toward. Not the absence of storms, but the presence of roots. Not the absence of critics, but the presence of clarity. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Because when your strength lives within, no loss can destroy you, no rejection can diminish you, and no manipulator can shake you. You are untouchable, not because life is easy, but because your resolve is unbreakable. But to the one who has walked through betrayal and disappointment, silence becomes something entirely different. It becomes rebirth. When you finally step away from the noise, the manipulation, the endless explanations, you start to hear something you've been missing all along, your own voice. In the stillness, you reconnect with the person you were before the chaos, the person who dreamed, who hoped, who loved without fear. That part of you was never gone. It was only buried under the weight of someone else's demands. Rebirth in silence isn't about revenge. It's about rediscovery. It's the moment you realize you don't need their apology, their validation, or their recognition. You only need space to breathe again. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You start to grow back stronger, clearer, freer. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that life is too short, but that we waste much of it." And the greatest waste is giving your energy to relationships that drain instead of nourish, to people who take instead of give. In your silence, you are no longer wasting. You are investing not in them, but in yourself. Think of a forest after a fire. At first, it looks like devastation. Everything seems lost. But give it time, and new life begins to emerge from the ashes. Stronger roots push through the soil. Fresh growth climbs toward the Sunday. That's what your silence is doing for you. It's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. And here's the truth. People will misinterpret your silence. They'll call it cold, distant, uncaring. They'll say you've changed. You've changed because you're no longer available to be drained. You've changed because you've stopped offering your soul as a sacrifice for someone else's comfort. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. When you walked away quietly, you didn't slam the door. You didn't burn the bridge. You simply stopped crossing it. And that decision is what sets you free. Because real healing doesn't need an audience. Real transformation doesn't beg to be seen. It simply lives in you, steady and undeniable. Ask yourself, how many times did you explain your worth to people who had already decided not to see it? How many nights did you rehearse speeches in your head, hoping your words would finally break through? Silence is what happens when you realize you don't need to prove anything anymore. Your peace is your proof. And here's the beauty of it. Silence unsettles those who once thrived on your chaos. They expected you to argue. They prepared for the drama, the guilt, the pleading, but they never prepared for your peace. And that peace, that's what haunts them. Not your anger, not your absence, your peace. Because peace is unshakable. Peace is untouchable. Peace is the loudest statement you'll ever make. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And that's exactly what you've become. Unlike them, you didn't mirror their cruelty. You didn't reflect their chaos. You chose a higher path, a path where silence becomes your shield and peace becomes your victory. So if you find yourself in the quiet right now, don't mistake it for loneliness. It's not loneliness. It's rebirth. It's the sound of your soul rebuilding itself, of your spirit stretching toward the light again. It's the proof that you've finally stopped betraying yourself for the sake of someone who never deserved you. You don't need to announce your healing, because in the end, the people who truly see you won't need explanations. They'll feel your growth. They'll recognize your peace. And the ones who lost you, they'll feel it too. Not because you wanted them to suffer, but because you embodied the one thing they could never control: your rebirth. So breathe deeply, stand tall, let the silence cradle you, guide you, renew you. Because this silence isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the life you were always meant to live. So here we are, at the end of this journey. And maybe you've been waiting for me to tell you how to get even, how to make them regret, how to force them to see what they lost. But the truth is, you don't need that. You don't need revenge. You don't need an apology. You don't even need their recognition. Because your peace, your calm, your quiet strength, that is the loudest statement you could ever make. The world often teaches us that justice means payback, that to prove your worth, you have to show them what they missed. But the Stoics taught something different. They taught that the highest form of justice is mastery over yourself, that when someone wrongs you, the only true victory is to remain unshaken. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And isn't that the deepest truth? To live well, to live free, to live unbothered, that is victory. Think about it. What's stronger, screaming to prove your point, or walking away in silence that says everything? What's braver, chasing closure from someone who can't give it, or closing the door yourself and choosing to move forward? Your silence is not weakness. It's wisdom. Your peace is not surrender. It's strength. Your healing is not about them. It's about you. And yes, people may never admit what they lost when they lost you. They may cover it up with noise, with distractions, with pride. But their acknowledgement isn't what matters. What matters is that you've chosen a higher path. You've chosen to stop bleeding for people who never bothered to bring a bandage. You've chosen to stop waiting for love in places that only gave you chaos. You've chosen yourself. That's not selfishness. That's survival. That's growth. That's clarity. And if there's one phrase I want you to carry with you after this, it's this: I choose peace. Say it out loud if you have to. Whisper it to yourself in the mirror. Write it down and keep it close. I choose peace, not because the world is easy, not because people won't hurt you again, but because peace is the one thing no one can take from you unless you hand it over. I choose peace means I choose myself. I choose to stop betraying my own soul for the sake of someone else's comfort. I choose to protect my energy. I choose to walk away when love starts to look like manipulation. I choose to honor my boundaries, my time, my worth. And here's the beauty of it. Every time you say it, every time you live it, you step deeper into a life no one can steal from you. A life that belongs entirely to you. This isn't about becoming untouchable in the eyes of others. It's about becoming untouchable in your own heart. It's about living with such clarity that their chaos can't disturb your calm. Such strength that their rejection can't dim your light. Such peace that their absence can't shake your foundation. Your story is not ending here. It's just beginning. This chapter of loss, betrayal, and silence, it isn't the final page. It's the opening of a new book. A book where you are no longer the victim of someone else's storms, but the author of your own calm. So walk forward. Breathe deep. Choose peace every day, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely. Because peace isn't a destination. It's a practice, a daily choice. And every time you make it, you grow stronger, wiser, freer. The Stoic path is not about erasing pain. It's about transforming it, not about suppressing emotion, but about rising above the control of others. And when you say, I choose peace, you're not just making a statement. You're making a promise to yourself, a promise that no matter what comes, you will not abandon yourself again. This is your declaration, your reminder, your strength. So let me ask you, are you ready to say it with me? 3 words. Simple, but life-changing. I choose peace. Let that be your ending. Let that be your beginning. Because from here on out, your life is yours, and no one can take it away.